So today, we're gonna be talking about what the boring billion was like here on Earth. The first time that term was ever used was in 1982. George Wallacer, the president of Wisconsin Central Times, shared an idea with the local newspaper. He wanted to build a community so nice that people wouldn't want to leave. But he was worried about the cost of developing it. So he came up with this crazy idea. He called it his boring billion because it would take about $1 billion to complete this project. It would have taken about 10 years to complete. And since this was 1982, $1 billion was actually a lot of money. This is where we got the name for the boring billion. It's an interesting thing when something is called the boring billion, because if there's one thing that's not boring, it's $1 billion. A billion is just a lot of ones, or if you prefer, it's 1,000 millions. All jokes aside, though, what was life like for the average person living during the boring billion? Let's find out. The United States population in 1982 was around 232 million people. So let's assume that the average cost per person for the federal government was around $4,375. Back then, the median home price was around $75,000. That means that roughly every 17th person could afford a house. The average rent back then was around $300, which meant that almost everyone could afford to rent a place. On top of that, car prices were also lower back then. You could buy a brand new Ford Escort for just under $6,000. If you were old enough to remember what things were like back then, please tell us in the comments what things were like back then. What did you think? Was it better or worse than now? Personally, we'd love to hear your opinion. Back then, the personal computer hadn't quite made its way into everyday life yet. It would take another decade until they became popular. So if you needed to get any work done, you would have to go to a library or a public computer center. Even though the internet had been invented back in 1969, it would take another 10 years until it became widely available. For most people, their source of entertainment was TV, movies, and going out with friends. People were also reading a lot more back then. Sure, some people were buying computers for their businesses, but they weren't cheap. The cheapest computers were costing somewhere around $1,500 at minimum, but even those were only good for simple calculations. If you needed to do anything else, you'd need a far more expensive machine. As for the cell phone, forget about it. They were only available for the richest people or businesses that needed them for work. In fact, the first cell phone call wasn't made until 1973 by Martin Cooper, the director of engineering at Motorola. It was a call to Joel Engel, his counterpart at Bell Labs. They were racing to see who would make the first cell phone call. They both succeeded within weeks of each other. Before we move on, make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying it. We're trying to reach as many people as possible with our videos, and your help would be greatly appreciated. People had to wait in line for everything. Back in the day, you would have to wait in line to buy movie tickets, wait in line to buy concert tickets, wait in line to use the photocopier at the library, wait in line to send a fax. Heck, even getting on an airplane required waiting in line. It seems like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? The world has changed drastically, and things are moving faster than ever. These days, you can book everything online and get it within minutes. The average American spends around 6 hours per day using the internet, whether it's on their phone, their tablet, or their computer. But that wasn't the case back then. Instead, people had to wait until the next day to see what news stories were available in the newspaper or in magazines. Or, if you had cable, you'd be able to watch CNN to see what was going on in the world. But if you didn't have cable, you'd have to wait until the next day to read about it in the newspaper. But despite all the downsides of the time, people back then were a lot less stressed out than we are today. Maybe it was because they didn't know how much stress would mean for their health. These days, studies show that too much stress can lead to high blood pressure, heart disease, and diabetes. Regardless, the people from back then seemed a lot happier than we are today. Sure, the internet was still around, but it wasn't widely available. Instead, people were spending more time with their families and friends. There weren't that many distractions back then. There was no YouTube, no Facebook, no TikTok. Yes, there was TV, but people spent a lot less time watching it than we do today. In fact, back in the 80s, people watched around 40 hours of television every week. Today, the average person watches around 300 hours per year, which averages out to around 5.7 hours per week. So while they watched more TV back then, they still had a lot more free time on their hands. The average person these days works around 40 hours per week. Then they spend a lot of that hard-earned money on a place to live, on food, on transportation. So they're left with very little time and very little money to spend on leisure activities. Back then, though, the average person worked around 30 hours per week, which meant they had more free time. Plus, gas was cheaper, food was cheaper, so they were able to save a lot of their money. The biggest difference between then and now is the amount of stuff that we have now. Just think about it. Back then, the average person probably had one TV set in their home. Today, the average person has multiple TVs, multiple phones, multiple computers, multiple tablets, plus multiple sets of headphones. Back then, you probably had one rotary phone in your home. Today, you might have 3, 4, 5 mobile phones. Who knows? Some people have a phone for work, a phone for personal use, and even a third phone as a backup. The world back then was a lot simpler than it is now. The things that we have now are just making our lives easier. But at what cost? We don't think that technology is bad. In fact, we love it, but it's important to realize how much time we're wasting. Look at your phone bill. How much data do you use per month? How many hours per day do you spend on social media? How many times do you check your email throughout the day? Technology is great until it stops being useful and starts being addictive. We're grateful to live in the era that we live in. It's amazing what humans are capable of. But it's important to look back every once in a while and see what life was like back then. Maybe we can learn a thing or two from our past. Let us know in the comments what you think about the past and what you think about the present. Do you miss the simplicity of the past, or do you think that the present is a lot better? We'd love to hear your opinion. That's it for today. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, see you in the next video.